Long before anyone on Earth knew about life beyond the stars, the galaxy already knew something very important about humans. It wasn't written in any human book or taught in any Earth school. It was written in the memories of hundreds of alien species, kept safe in ancient records that only the Galactic Council could access. And in those records, one rule was repeated again and again like a warning carved into stone. The first law of the galaxy: do not harm human children. Most humans would have laughed if they heard such a rule. They were used to being seen as small, late-arriving newcomers in the universe. In fact, as far as Earth knew, humans were still alone. They looked up at the stars with curiosity, not fear. They imagined alien life as peaceful explorers, or maybe distant neighbors. They certainly did not imagine the galaxy had a law made specifically for them. But the galaxy had its reasons. The truth was simple and strange at the same time. Humans were not the strongest species, not the smartest, not the oldest, and not the most advanced. Their ships, at this point in history, were nothing compared to the giant star cruisers built by older civilizations. Their technology could not compete with the glowing bioengineered devices found in other worlds. Humans seemed ordinary. And yet, the law existed. Many alien elders told stories about the past stories, whispered in dim council halls or passed down privately to the next generation of leaders. These stories spoke of times when humans were pushed to extreme limits. Not just fear or danger, but something deeper. Something that touched the heart in a way that left a mark on the universe. Whenever human children were put in danger, something unusual happened. Something that even the galaxy struggled to explain. The old historians described it as a flare, a burst of instinct humans themselves didn't know they possessed. Adults would gain sudden awareness or impossible strength for a brief moment. Entire groups of them would act with perfect unity without even speaking. Their emotions synchronized like a shared heartbeat. These moments were rare and unpredictable, but they were enough to make the Council cautious. But there was something even stranger, something the Council never told the public. When the flare happened, it affected not only humans, but the environment around them. Machines nearby would overload or shut down. Communication signals would scatter like ripples in a pond. Some old reports even mentioned small gravitational distortions around the children, like space itself bent to shield them. Scientists argued whether these events were real or exaggerated, but the stories were documented. And the Council believed every word. The Council had seen many ancient species rise and fall, but nothing confused them more than the hidden reactions in the human genome. Every other species developed their strengths through technology or evolution. Humans, however, had something inside them, something dormant. And the trigger for that something was always the same: danger to their young. That is why, many generations ago, the Council passed the first law. It wasn't meant to protect humans. It was meant to protect everyone else. The law was clear. No soldier, no officer, no representative from any planet or faction would ever harm or threaten a human child. Not even by accident. The rule was read out loud to every recruit in the Council forces, engraved onto training halls, and included in every diplomatic agreement. It became the one rule no species dared to question. Still, most people in the galaxy never understood its importance. To them, it looked like a polite gesture toward a young species. Only high-rank leaders knew the real fear behind it. They had seen the old recordings, the ones that were never shown to the public. Footage of a simple human settlement event, forgotten by history, where a small mistake led to chaos. In the video, when a young human was startled and injured during a conflict, the sky itself seemed to react. Machines malfunctioned across half the settlement. Adults experienced sudden flashes of awareness, moving in ways no training could teach. The Council stored that footage far away from curious eyes, sealed with layers of security. But the memory of it shaped galactic policy for centuries. Ironically, humans themselves grew up completely unaware. Entire generations lived and died on Earth, believing the universe was empty. They told stories of aliens in movies and books, never thinking some of those stories might hold pieces of truth. They imagined space as a place for adventure, not a place that quietly watched them with caution. Meanwhile, on distant planets filled with glowing forests and floating mountains, alien students learned the first law before they learned their own constellations. In star academies, young cadets memorized it before they even studied physics. Many asked their teachers why human children were special, and the teachers simply said, because human children hold the safety of the galaxy in their hands. It became a myth, then a belief, and a rule no one questioned. But over time, generations changed and memories faded. Younger politicians, born in times of comfort, began treating the first law as nothing more than an old ceremonial tradition. They didn't feel the same fear the elders did. They didn't understand why one small species deserved such protection. Some even felt frustrated by it. They believed the galaxy had advanced enough that old rules no longer mattered. One particular region of space, a cluster of worlds near the spiral edge of the galaxy, had many young officers who shared this attitude. They grew up with peace and rarely studied the old records. To them, humanity was just another species among thousands. The first law felt outdated, unnecessary, and maybe even a little unfair. Why should humans get special treatment? Why should one species have a rule written just for them? The elders knew such thinking could be dangerous, but warnings were ignored. It was becoming harder to teach new leaders the importance of ancient lessons. Many simply didn't want to listen. The galaxy had grown too comfortable, but the universe has a way of reminding people of forgotten truths, and that reminder was already on its way far across the star systems. A small human research group settled on a peaceful planet named Aurealis III. It was a quiet world with soft green plains, gentle winds, and 3 moons that lit up the night sky like lanterns. Families worked together studying plants, animals, and weather patterns. Their children played under the triple moon glow, laughing while the wind carried strange alien scents through the air. The settlement was small, but happy. They had no idea the galaxy had a law protecting them. They had no idea their presence alone made council members nervous. For the humans on Aurealis III, life felt like a long camping trip on a friendly, distant world. They thought they were simply explorers. They didn't know they were at the center of one of the galaxy's oldest rules, and as the moons turned, and the research stations continued their work, a quiet storm was already forming far away, a mix of political confusion, careless leadership, and growing tension between star systems. The Galactic Council was stretched thin, dealing with disputes across many sectors. Officers were stressed, leaders were frustrated, and the younger generation of decision-makers were eager to show confidence and take control. In that pressure, mistakes often happen, and in the galaxy, there is no mistake more dangerous than forgetting the first law. What happened next would shake every world, every species, and every leader who ever doubted the rule. It would reveal secrets buried for centuries and unlock something in humanity's past that even humans themselves didn't know existed. But all of that begins with a single truth. The first law of the galaxy didn't exist because humans needed protection. It existed because the galaxy needed protection from what happens when human children cry out in fear. And soon, the galaxy would learn that lesson once again. Aurealis III was one of those planets that felt calm even before sunrise. The grass there had a soft blue tint, and when the wind blew through it, the whole field moved like a quiet ocean. The human settlement sat on a gentle hill overlooking these fields. Small research stations, round cabins, and a few tall communication towers were scattered across the area. The people who lived there felt lucky. They were far from the noise of Earth, far from its busy cities, and far from any idea that the galaxy was paying attention to them. The families on Aurealis 3 focused on simple work studying plants, collecting samples, testing the soil, and sending results back to Earth. They believed their mission was peaceful and important. For them, it was a chance to understand a new world and maybe help future generations live among the stars one day. Their children were the heart of the settlement. They ran down the slopes, chased glowing insects at night, and played games under the triple moons. Every adult felt protective of them, because a small mistake on an alien world could lead to trouble. But even then, the settlement felt safe. They had no reason to expect danger. No one had warned them that Aurealis 3 was close to a border where different alien factions often argued over territory. And even if someone had warned them, no human would imagine the risk that was coming. For the Council, Aurealis 3 was just another tiny dot on a star map. A place far away, not important enough for daily reports. But for two alien factions, a trading guild and a regional alliance, this dot had recently become an accidental point of tension. A misunderstanding over trade routes had escalated into a minor dispute. Nothing serious, nothing violent, just enough to send a council patrol to calm things down. The patrol was led by a young officer who came from one of the newer academy generations. He was confident, ambitious, and eager to prove himself. He wanted to show that he could handle a diplomatic situation without calling for help from his seniors. To him, Aurealis 3 was just another boring assignment. He didn't even know humans lived there. He didn't know the first law was supposed to be followed above all others. And even if he had heard of it, he would have brushed it off as an outdated guideline from the old days. His ship entered the planet's orbit early in the morning. The humans on the surface saw it as a bright streak across the sky. At first, they thought it was a meteor. But when they saw lights changing direction and slowing down, they realized it was something else. A few adults stepped out of their cabins, shielding their eyes as the ship descended. A few children pointed excitedly, thinking it was some kind of new transport vehicle from Earth. No, one imagined it was the beginning of a moment that the galaxy feared. When the patrol landed, the officer and his team stepped out wearing polished armor and carrying scanning devices. They were calm and professional, but they clearly didn't understand human customs. They waved their devices around without speaking, inspecting the area as if it were empty land. The humans approached politely, speaking in simple words, trying to communicate. Some of the officers seemed surprised. A few looked uneasy, probably realizing that if humans were here, their operation could become complicated. The young officer, however, didn't want complications. He wanted quick results. He believed the best way to avoid conflict between the two alien factions was to secure the region and remove all activity from the young surface. He didn't ask questions. He didn't send a message to the council. He simply issued an order. Everyone should be gathered in one place so he could decide what to do next. The humans tried to explain that they were peaceful researchers and that their children were present. But the officer dismissed their concerns. He felt the humans were slowing him down. He had grown up hearing that humans were harmless, slow, and inexperienced. He didn't respect them. He didn't even consider that the first law applied to this small settlement. His own soldiers exchanged uncertain glances. Some of them remembered hearing something about human children during their training. But the officer's tone left them unsure whether they should speak up. No one wanted to challenge him. Soon the situation grew tense. The officer began guiding the families toward the central area of the settlement, insisting it was for their safety. The adults cooperated, but the children were frightened by the sudden seriousness. Their smiles faded, and they clung to their parents. That was when the first mistake happened. a scanning drone. Flying low and fast, zipped too close to a group of children who were standing near the edge of the settlement. The device was not meant to harm anyone. It was simply programmed to detect energy patterns. But in its quick movement, it brushed too near a small child who stumbled backward in fright. The adults rushed forward, calling out in alarm. One of the children fell to the ground. It wasn't a serious fall, just a bump and a scrape, but the shock of it sent fear rippling through the group. The officer barely reacted. He waved his hand dismissively and ordered the drone to continue its sweep. That was the second mistake. The children started crying, their voices sharp and frightened. The adults held them close, trying to calm them. The officer frowned, annoyed. He ordered his team to hurry up. But the soldiers could feel something strange in the air, a small, almost invisible shift, like the moment before a storm. They glanced at each other, unsure why the atmosphere suddenly felt heavy. The wind slowed. The grass stopped swaying. Even the insects, usually glowing and buzzing, fell silent. One soldier took a step back, sensing something was wrong. He looked at the officer and tried to speak. But the officer, irritated by the delay, raised his voice instead. He wanted order. He wanted silence. He wanted control. But in that moment, he lost all of it because the children's distress triggered something ancient, something the galaxy had feared for centuries. It began as a faint ripple spreading out from where the children stood. It wasn't visible, not exactly, but it could be felt. A soft vibration in the chest, a slight hum behind the ears. The soldiers looked around in confusion. Their scanning devices flickered. Lights dimmed and brightened. Their armor systems showed warnings they had never seen before. The officer looked at his tablet, confused when it started flashing symbols he didn't recognize. He smacked the side of it, thinking it was malfunctioning. But the problem wasn't the tablet. The problem was the air around him. The human adults felt it too. Their hearts beat faster, not just from fear, but from something else, something that awakened deep inside them. Their senses sharpened. They felt an odd clarity spreading through them, as though they could hear the heartbeat of every person scattered across the settlement. Their thoughts aligned, their instincts sharpened. It wasn't a violent feeling. It was protective, focused, ancient. The children in the center of the group began to glow softly, like dust caught in sunlight. It wasn't bright, it wasn't dangerous, and it wasn't harmful. It was gentle, almost beautiful, but it made every soldier step back in fear. One soldier whispered, "The first law." Another whispered, "We broke it." The officer froze. For the first time that day, he felt fear. He didn't know what the first law truly meant. He had only heard it mentioned in passing, described as a cautionary tale from the old days. But as he watched the glowing dust swirl around the children and felt the strange pressure building in the air, he finally understood that he had made a mistake far bigger than he. Realized the humans did not attack. They did not shout. They did not threaten. But their fear for their children awakened something the galaxy had never fully understood. Machines around the settlement shut down. The patrol's ship flickered like a dying star. Communication signals collapsed. The officer tried to speak, but his voice cracked. One of his soldiers looked at him with panic in their eyes. For the first time, the officer saw the real weight of the rule. He had ignored. He had broken the first law, and the consequences were just beginning. What happened on Aurealis 3 that morning would echo across the galaxy, waking old fears, reviving old secrets, and forcing the Council to face a truth it had buried for centuries. And none of it would have happened if one careless officer had simply remembered the rule. Every elder repeated, "Never harm human children, not even by accident." Because the galaxy wasn't protecting the children. It was protecting itself, the strange ripple that spread across Aurealis 3, did not behave like anything known to science. It didn't roar like a storm or flash like lightning. It moved quietly, almost politely, as if it didn't want to frighten anyone. But even in its softness, it carried something powerful, something ancient, something that had been sleeping inside humans for longer than any species in the galaxy had existed. The children were at the center of it, their tiny shoulders shaking from the earlier scare, their eyes still wet with tears. But as they clung to their parents, a gentle shimmer rose around them, like a faint mist catching the morning light. The adults held them closer, feeling their hearts beat in sync with the children's fast breaths. No one understood what was happening, yet something inside them recognized the feeling. It was as if an invisible hand had tapped the deepest part of their instincts and whispered, "Wake up." Every adult felt it first as a strange stillness. Their thoughts became clearer, sharper. Their fear did not disappear, but it changed. It became focused, organized, almost shared. They could sense each other's emotions without speaking. If one adult felt fear, the other sensed it. If one tried to calm themselves, the calm spread slightly through the group. None of them noticed this at first. They were too busy comforting their children, too shaken by the alien officer's behavior, too worried about the patrol soldiers who now stood frozen, unsure of what to do. But the soldiers noticed something else. Their devices were failing. One soldier glanced down at the small scanner clipped to her belt. The device flickered, its readings jumping wildly, even though there was no visible threat. The air wasn't dense, the temperature wasn't changing, and yet the sensors claimed something massive was happening. Another soldier looked at the patrol ship. Its lights dimmed, blinked rapidly, then steadied again, but only for a moment. Sections of the hull began to hum. Panels inside the ship opened and closed on their own, reacting to signals the crew didn't understand. The young officer finally felt the shift too. He tried to speak, but the words stuck in his throat. He wasn't being attacked. That was the truly confusing part. No one was fighting him. No one was running. No one was shouting. The humans were only holding their children, huddling together in fear. And yet the world around him was changing. The officer stepped back, trying to regain control. He raised his arm and attempted to activate his communicator. The screen flashed, then went completely blank. He tapped it again. Nothing. He raised his head, eyes wide, breathing heavy. Why? Why is everything failing? He muttered. A nearby soldier answered quietly. It's them. The children. The officer snapped his head toward the soldier. That's impossible. They're just... His words stopped when he noticed something he could no longer deny. The shimmer around the children was growing. Not brighter, not louder, just stronger. The air around them looked like it carried tiny particles glowing softly, forming waves that pulsed outward. Every time those waves passed through the patrol soldiers, they felt their armor stiffen or loosen without reason. It wasn't painful. It wasn't harmful. It was simply altering things, adjusting them, like it was making space around the humans safer. One of the parents finally noticed the glow. Instead of panicking, they froze, as if recognizing it from a dream they'd forgotten. The glow didn't feel dangerous. It felt protective. It felt warm. The parent didn't understand why, but the fear inside their chest began to settle. The children, sensing their parents' calmness, slowly stopped crying. The last of the tears dried on their cheeks. They didn't understand what was happening either, but they felt safer. And then came the pulse dot. It wasn't loud, or bright, or physical. It didn't shake the ground. But every living creature for miles felt it inside their chest. Thump. A single, silent pulse that touched every human like a shared heartbeat. The adults inhaled sharply at the same time. Even the children blinked in unison. Something inside them clicked, Not a memory, not a thought, but an instinct passed down through generations, got far above the planet. Satellites orbiting Borealis 3 detected the pulse. Their signals scrambled for a moment, sending bursts of corrupted data into space. These signals traveled far, farther than the settlement, farther than the region, farther than the sector. The pulse reached deep into the galaxy, across star systems. Humans felt a strange flutter in their chest, not painful, just odd. A brief moment where their senses sharpened and then returned to normal. Most shook it off as a random feeling. A strange coincidence. Nothing unusual, but the Council knew Dot in a tall chamber of the Galactic Council, where thousands of lights blinked across the ceiling. Alarms began blinking. Machines that hadn't been activated in centuries switched on automatically. Data streams flooded the panels. Council members turned to one another, confused. "No," whispered one of the elder representatives, staring at the display. "It can't be." The readouts were clear. A human activation had occurred. Not a fight, an attack. Just the faint awakening of something buried deep within the human genome. The elders who remembered. The old days felt cold fear grip their hearts. "It has happened," one murmured. "The first law has been broken." Meanwhile, back on Borealis 3, the humans and soldiers hadn't moved. They stood facing one another, separated by a few meters. Each group scared, but for different reasons. The officer finally found his voice. He stepped back, lifting his hands slightly, as if approaching a wild, unpredictable creature. But he didn't point his weapon. Even he understood that would be the worst mistake possible. "Stand. Stand down," he said to his own team. His voice shaky. One of the parents gently whispered to the children, trying to soothe them. The glow around them slowly faded, but the strange energy in the air remained. Machines were still malfunctioning, devices still flickering. The adults looked at one another, sharing silent understanding. None of them knew what the pulse meant, but they could feel its effects inside themselves. Their awareness was heightened, like their senses had widened. They could smell the air more clearly, hear distant sounds, and even sense each other's thoughts and faint impressions. It wasn't telepathy, not exactly. More like intuition sharpened to an impossible level. One parent felt another's fear and comforted them without needing words. Another sensed a faint idea in their mind, the need to step forward, to create distance between the soldiers and the children. Without speaking, several adults took a step forward at the same time. It wasn't a coordinated move. It wasn't planned. Yet they moved together with perfect timing, as if connected by invisible threads. The soldiers stepped back immediately, startled. The officer swallowed hard. He felt trapped between his pride and the pressure of the moment. But the clear malfunction of his equipment forced him to accept reality. He was no longer in control, and deep down, he knew he had made a catastrophic mistake. He took a small step forward, lowering his voice, trying to sound calm. "We didn't mean to." He stopped, unable to finish the sentence. He wasn't sure what he meant. He wasn't sure if it mattered, but the humans didn't respond with anger. None of them yelled. None accused him. They were too busy holding their children, who were still recovering from the fear that triggered everything. The officer stared at the humans, finally understanding something important. They weren't dangerous. They weren't hostile. They weren't even aware of what had happened. It wasn't an attack. It was a reaction, a protective force built into their very being, triggered by the distress of their children. And that realization frightened him more than anything, because if this was only the beginning, if this was just the smallest hint of what human children could awaken, then the old stories were true. Humanity wasn't ordinary. Humanity wasn't harmless. Humanity had something inside them that the galaxy had never fully understood. And the first law existed for a reason. The officer looked around slowly. His patrol ship was nearly disabled. His soldiers were frightened. The air itself felt charged with some kind of invisible energy. This was no small incident. It was the awakening. And the galaxy, whether ready or not, had heard the call. The pulse sent from Aurealis 3 did not stop at the atmosphere. It kept traveling, soft as a whisper, but powerful enough to touch devices, satellites, and old council systems that most people had forgotten even existed. While life on the small human settlement changed moment by moment, something much larger had already started unfolding across the galaxy. In the center of the Galactic Council, in a grand circular chamber filled with floating lights and quiet hums, alarms blinked red for the first time in hundreds of years. Panels lit up with warnings. Old files no one had opened in generations were automatically unsealed by the system's emergency protocol. The younger members of the council stared at the screens with confusion. Most of them had never even heard of these alerts. They whispered among themselves, asking what the symbols meant. Some even joked nervously, saying the system must be malfunctioning. But the elders did not laugh. Their faces turned pale. Their eyes followed the data like people reading a message they prayed would never come. A deep silence filled the room as one elder slowly placed a trembling hand on the table. "It has happened," the elder said softly. "A human activation." The younger members froze, even if they didn't fully understand the details. They all knew the name of the rule connected to such an event: the first law of the galaxy. The first law had been repeated in every academy, printed in every manual, carved inside every council hall. Most thought it was a ceremonial rule, an old relic from ancient times. They believed it existed only for political reasons, a kind of polite promise to keep peace with a species that wasn't very advanced yet. But the elders remembered the truth. They remembered the old recordings that showed entire fields of technology shutting down when human children were threatened. They remembered the silent pulses that could reach across star systems. They remembered the way human adults reacted with unnatural unity, moving with instinct and awareness that no other species could match. And now it was happening again. The council chamber filled with murmurs. Some representatives demanded explanations. Others insisted the readings must be wrong, because humans weren't capable of such things. But the elders knew better. They had been waiting for the day someone would break the first law again, waiting with fear, hoping the universe would never see another activation. What caused it? Asked one representative. Eyes wide, the data displayed a location. IAL is -3. A young official leaned closer to the screen. Wasn't that a research world? I think the humans have a small settlement there. The elders exchanged glances. Small settlement or not, it was enough. The head elder, a quiet figure who only spoke when necessary, finally said a patrol was near that region. Check the officer assigned there. A few seconds later, the identity of the officer appeared. He was young, inexperienced, and part of a generation that barely respected the first law. Many elders sighed, already knowing what had happened. Without needing a report, he didn't know. One of them whispered, he didn't care to know. Another replied, but none of them needed the details to grasp the gravity of the situation. Breaking the first law wasn't like breaking any other rule. It wasn't about angering the humans. Humans didn't even know the rule existed. The real danger lay in what woke up inside them when their children felt fear. The council's highest security team was called in. They gathered in a side chamber filled with old screens and ancient star maps. Only a few of them understood the old symbols. One of the maps showed regions where human flares had been detected. Centuries ago, small points spread across the galaxy like tiny sparks in the darkness. Each spark represented a moment where human children had been pushed into danger. And every spark came with consequences that terrified the Council. One team member opened the sealed recordings. The room fell silent. Everyone watched the footage from the past. Humans huddled together during an attack long, long ago. Children crying. Adults reacting with impossible coordination. Machines shutting down. Gravity shifting slightly. Light bending. A ripple that spread without harming anyone, but disrupting everything. The elder closed the file. That is why the law exists, they said in a heavy voice. It is not meant to protect humans. It is meant to protect us. But it was too late for warnings. Too late for reminders. The activation on Borealis 3 had already begun. Back on the planet, the humans felt the strange energy in their bodies settling, becoming calmer but not disappearing. The children were no longer crying. Their faces looked peaceful, almost glowing, as if their fear had been replaced by comfort. The adults stood close together, feeling each other's emotions like faint waves. They didn't talk much because they didn't need to. The sense of unity between them was stronger than words. It wasn't something they understood, but it made them feel connected, protected, and quietly aware of every movement around them. The alien soldiers remained frozen in place, unsure whether to retreat or apologize or simply stand still. They had never experienced anything like this. None of their training had prepared them for a moment where the planet itself seemed to bend to the emotions of human children. The officer, who had been so confident earlier, felt his legs weaken. He looked around helplessly, realizing his authority meant nothing now. His ship didn't respond to commands. His communication devices were dead. His soldiers were too scared to follow orders. For the first time in his life, he began to understand why some rules existed without explanation. One of the soldiers approached him slowly. "Sir, we need to report this to the council." The officer didn't answer right away. He stared at the humans, not with anger, not with disrespect, but with something closer to regret. He lowered his voice and whispered, "They will know. They always know." He was right. At that very moment, council emergency messages were spreading across the galaxy. Old leaders were waking up from their rest cycles. Officers were rushing to control rooms. Information channels lit up with the same message. A human activation has occurred. The first law has been violated. Prepare a response protocol. Meanwhile, news leaks spread like wildfire. In some star systems, people panicked, fearing ancient legends were true. In others, they demanded answers from the council, asking why such secrets had been kept hidden for so long. Many species had never had direct contact with humans. They had only heard stories. Some thought humans were harmless. Others thought the stories were exaggerations. But now the legends were coming back to life, and the galaxy could not ignore them anymore. On Borealis 3, the energy around the settlement slowly changed. Birds that usually avoided the humans now gathered nearby, curious and calm. The wind blew softly again, as if unsure whether it was allowed to disturb the air. The shimmering particles around the children faded, but the sense of power remained like a quiet echo. The humans held their kids tightly, unsure what had just happened or why they felt so connected. Some of them glanced at the soldiers with sympathy, realizing the aliens looked more frightened than anyone else. The officer finally stepped forward with slow, careful movements. I didn't know," he said, voice trembling. "We didn't come to harm you." One of the human adults met his eyes. There was no anger in their expression, only confusion and sadness. "You scared our children," they said gently. That was enough. The officer lowered his head. For the first time, he understood the meaning of the first law, even though no one had explained it to him. He understood that fear, especially fear in a child, could ripple through the universe in ways he could never control. And somewhere deep inside the council chambers, elders were already preparing for what came next. They knew the hardest part was not the pulse itself, but the questions it would bring. Why did humans react this way? Where did this ability come from? And who or what had placed such power inside human children long before the council even existed? The galaxy was about to face its oldest secret, and the humans on Aurealis III were standing at the center of it, still unaware of how many worlds were now watching them with fear, curiosity, and hope. When news about the injured children reached the human settlement on Aurealis III, everything changed in a single hour. Until that point, people on the planet had been living their lives quietly. Most of them were researchers, farmers, or technicians who had chosen this calm world because it was peaceful and full of natural beauty. They had never imagined their small colony would become the center of a galaxy-wide crisis. When the pulse from the children spread outward, none of the adults knew what it meant. They only knew something inside them felt different, like a sudden sharpening of the senses. People said their thoughts seemed clearer, their hearing stronger, and their awareness wider than ever before. It wasn't painful or frightening, just unfamiliar, like waking up from a long sleep and realizing you had been half awake all along. Parents rushed to check on their children. Some kids were still resting, others confused, and a few were glowing faintly with that strange, soft light. That glow wasn't bright like a lamp. It was more like a gentle shimmer, almost like their skin was reflecting morning sunlight even when they stood in the shade. It didn't hurt them at all. In fact, they seemed calm, even a little dazed, as if they were listening to something far away. The parents were terrified, not because anything harmful was happening, but because they didn't understand what was happening at all. They wanted answers, and they wanted reassurance that their kids were safe. Every parent on the planet gathered in meeting halls, community centers, and open fields to discuss what they should do next. Human leaders communicated with Earth, explaining that something strange had happened, but no one knew the cause. Meanwhile, a shimmering barrier formed around the human settlement. People later began calling it the activation veil, though at the time, no one knew its purpose. It wasn't solid. It didn't stop air or light. But when someone tried to walk through it, they felt a soft resistance, like stepping into a warm breeze. No one outside the human group could cross it. Alien researchers who tried to get close found their devices switching off and their scanners giving impossible readings. Humans, though, could pass through the veil freely. Some said they felt a sense of calm inside it, as if the veil itself recognized them. Others claimed they felt a faint echo, almost like their thoughts were being softly reflected back to them. Earth sent urgent messages to the Galactic Council, demanding explanations. Human diplomats were calm but firm. They insisted on full transparency. What was this pulse? Why did the children react this way? Why were the alien enforcement officers even near them? What caused the injuries? Humans wanted answers not to start a conflict, but to protect their families. The Council, however, was falling apart under pressure. Many leaders were afraid. Some tried to hide the truth, while others argued that the truth should have been shared long ago. People across the galaxy were learning about the first law and how it had been broken. Many alien citizens were angry at their own governments for keeping such history secret. On Aurealis III, the humans noticed that certain adults were developing unusual abilities. Again, nothing dangerous, just subtle changes. Some could sense emotions with surprising clarity. Others found they could predict a person's next movement, almost like their minds were one step ahead. A few discovered they could understand complex systems or patterns instantly, even those they had never studied. These abilities frightened them, but the adults stayed calm for the sake of the children. Scientists on the planet ran simple tests, trying to understand what was happening. They found nothing harmful, no illness, no radiation, no infection. It was as if the human body had simply unlocked something hidden. Meanwhile, the council sent a delegation to investigate, but the Viol stopped them. Their ships powered down when they approached. Their translators shut off. Their tools went silent. They had no choice but to remain at the edge of the barrier, watching helplessly while the humans inside tried their best to stay calm and united. The injured children were treated by human doctors and recovered quickly. To everyone's relief, their glow faded slightly as they rested. But even when the physical wounds healed, a strange energy around them remained. The parents stayed by their sides day and night, talking gently to them, comforting them, and making sure they felt loved and safe. Nobody blamed the children. Everyone knew they were simply reacting to something deep within them, something ancient that had been placed there long before any human alive was born. This realization shook the adults even more. They wondered who had done this. Why had humans been changed in the first place? And why had the Galactic Council never said a word? Earth finally managed to put together a small team of human diplomats, asking the Council for a direct explanation. The Council, desperate to avoid total collapse, agreed. Old records were opened, secrets that had been buried for thousands of years. But instead of sharing the information openly, some council leaders tried to send a covert team to Aurealis 3 to quietly take the injured children away for medical evaluation. This was the moment everything shifted. Team approached at night, hoping to pass unnoticed. But the Viol sensed their intentions. Before the aliens even reached the settlement, their equipment shut down completely. Their communication links fell silent. The ships they arrived in gently lowered themselves to the ground, as if carried by invisible hands. Inside the settlement, the human adults felt a sudden wave of emotion that was not their own. It was warm, calm, and strangely reassuring, like a soothing voice that didn't use words. When they looked toward the children, they noticed something amazing. The children were awake, sitting up, their eyes glowing softly. They weren't afraid. They weren't angry. They seemed aware of everything happening around them, with a focus far beyond their age. The parents felt the message echo gently in their minds, not in sentences, but in pure feeling. Not anger, not violence, not revenge, not just protection. The adults understood instantly. The children were not starting a conflict. They were stopping one. They didn't want anyone to be hurt, not humans, not aliens. They simply didn't want to be taken or treated like objects. This message spread outward like ripples in water. Every human adult felt it. And somehow, beings outside the Viol sensed it too. It wasn't a threat, it was a calm, steady reminder that some boundaries should never be crossed. When the alien team realized they couldn't move forward, they stepped back respectfully. After that, every member of the delegation surrendered without being asked. They were taken into custody by their own commanders, who were horrified that their people had attempted such a secret operation. From that moment, everything became easier. Council members who had been hiding information finally spoke up. They explained ancient history, the activation event, and why the first law had been created. The story was complicated, and many details were still unclear. But the truth began to emerge. People across the galaxy, human and alien alike, realized something important. The crisis on Aurealis 3 wasn't about fear or power. It was about understanding, protection, and the need for honesty. The children were not dangerous. They were a reminder of a past everyone had tried to bury. The adults on Aurealis 3 gathered together, feeling more connected than ever before. They knew the next decisions would shape the future of the entire galaxy. They also knew they weren't alone. Their children not with weapons, not with force, but with pure, peaceful intention, had shown the universe a better way to respond to fear. And deep inside, Every parent felt the same quiet realization. Whatever was happening to their children was not meant to harm the galaxy. It was meant to guide it. The days following the failed extraction attempt felt strangely peaceful on Aurealis 3. People expected anger from the Galactic Council, or maybe fear, or more attempts to take the children away. But none of that happened. Instead, the whole galaxy seemed to pause, waiting to see what the humans would do next. It was like the entire star system was holding its breath. Inside the human settlement, the atmosphere grew calmer. The shimmer in the children's skin softened into a warm glow that only appeared when they were emotional. Most of the time, they just looked like normal kids, tired, curious, and a little overwhelmed by all the attention. Their parents stayed close, watching them, comforting them, and reminding them that they were safe and loved. The adults, too, continued to feel subtle changes. Some found they could communicate with each other more easily, almost like they understood unspoken feelings. Others noticed they could calm someone down just by being near them. These abilities were gentle, not dramatic, and they didn't make anyone feel powerful. They simply made people feel more connected. The activation veil remained around the settlement, glowing faintly in the night. It wasn't a weapon. It didn't hurt anyone. It simply kept trouble away. Humans could walk through it freely, but alien machines still shut down near it. At first, this worried the Council, but over time, they realized it wasn't an attack, it was a boundary. A clear message that the children were not to be disturbed. Eventually, the Galactic Council requested a formal meeting. This time, they didn't send soldiers or secret teams. They sent peaceful representatives who arrived without weapons, without ships packed with hidden equipment, and without any demands. They came on small transport craft that stopped respectfully at the edge of the veil. Human diplomats stood outside the barrier, while the representatives spoke from a safe distance. The conversations were calm, quiet, and filled with long pauses as everyone tried to choose the right words. The Council admitted that mistakes were made. They admitted that the first law was older than anyone currently living. They admitted that their leaders, generations ago, had made a decision to keep the truth hidden because they feared what would happen if humans learned their own history. They didn't try to excuse themselves. They didn't defend the officer who had broken the first law. In fact, that officer had already been detained by his own people. The Council promised he would face a fair trial based on the laws of his world. No one asked humans to forgive him. They only asked for cooperation so the galaxy could move forward without falling apart. The humans on Aurealis 3 listened quietly. They didn't shout or argue. They didn't threaten or demand anything. They simply asked the only question that really mattered. Why had the first law been made in the first place? The Council hesitated before answering. Their voices were low and steady, almost regretful. As they revealed the old records, the same records humans on Earth had been shown earlier. These records described events thousands of years old, long before modern civilizations, when early humans were transported to distant planets for reasons no one fully understood. Those humans, placed in dangerous situations, had shown extraordinary survival responses triggered by extreme stress. They didn't harm other species on purpose. But whenever their children were threatened, something awakened inside them, a powerful instinct to protect. It wasn't destruction. It wasn't anger. It was pure defense. A force that activated in the presence of fear and stopped the moment the danger passed. The veil around Aurealis 3 was simply the newest expression of that instinct. And it wasn't created by machines or magic. It was created by the children themselves. Without even thinking about it, once this understanding spread across the galaxy, something surprising happened. Instead of fear, many species felt admiration. They realized humans weren't a danger, they were guardians. Even under threat, even with strange abilities awakening inside them, The first message the children sent was not one of harm, but one of protection. The council's representatives asked for permission to approach the veil, not to cross it, but simply to observe it up close. After discussing it, human leaders allowed it. A small group of representatives stood at the edge of the veil, watching how the soft waves of light moved in slow patterns, almost like ripples on a calm lake. They realized the veil was responding to emotions, not intentions. Whenever someone stepped closer with respectful curiosity, the light shimmered gently. But when someone approached with fear or worry, the veil stayed still. The council representatives thanked the humans for letting them witness the phenomenon. They promised they would not attempt any further interference. And for the first time, they asked something that no one had expected. They asked humans to take a seat in the Galactic Council. It wasn't a symbolic gesture. It wasn't an attempt to control humans or to cover up the truth. It was a recognition that the galaxy needed new voices, voices that understood both strength and peace, fear and compassion. Humans had shown through their children that even when pushed to the edge, they responded with protection rather than harm. The Council believed such a perspective could help guide future decisions for all species. On Aurealis 3, this proposal was met with mixed emotions. Some humans were honored, others uncertain. Many worried that joining the Council might lead to more secrets or more conflict. But most agreed that if humans wanted to prevent future misunderstandings, they had to be part of the conversation. They had to sit at the same table where decisions were made, not outside it. While debates continued, the children played quietly in the fields, unaware of the galaxy-wide discussions happening because of them. Their glow had mostly faded by now, slipping in and out like soft sparks when they laughed or became excited. Their parents watched them with a mixture of relief and amazement, realizing these small kids had changed the galaxy more than any adult leader ever could. Finally, after many talks and careful consideration, humans accepted the Council's invitation. But they made one request. The first law must remain, not as a rule based on fear, but as a promise of protection for all children in the galaxy, human or otherwise. The Council agreed unanimously. It was the first time a law had been rewritten in such a positive way. Inspired by unity instead of fear, the activation veil slowly began to dissolve after that. As the children recovered emotionally and physically, the soft barrier faded into brief flashes of light, then disappeared completely. Ships could approach again. Equipment worked normally. Life settled into calmness. One day, as the sun set on Aurealis 3, the children sat together on a small hill outside the settlement. They looked peaceful, completely unaware of the enormous impact they had made. A gentle breeze moved through the grass, carrying the quiet laughter of families finally at ease. And far above them, in the sky, new star routes opened. Diplomatic ships traveled between worlds with renewed hope. Species that had once avoided each other began talking. A system that had been built on fear slowly shifted toward cooperation. People across the galaxy understood something important now. The first law had been created long ago, not to protect humans, but to protect everyone else. But after witnessing how humans behaved in this crisis, calm, even under pressure, compassionate, even when threatened, that eyed